All right, today we're going to add the last shape from our circular shapes and finding the volume of these. These are spheres, so these can be anything from a basketball to a globe, and what can you fit inside, so how much air is inside the basketball, so on and so forth. So we're trying to fill these up. Volume equals, it's going to be very similar to some of our other circle ones, but it's also a little different. So you're going to see some similarities and some differences. It's 4/3 pi r to the third power. To the third power. So a little bit different than what we're used to. We're used to pi r squared, and the sphere is a little different. And when we worked with the cylinders and the cones, they were 1/3, and so we just divided by 3, and so 4/3 is going to work just slightly differently. So we want to work our way through this. The nice thing about the spheres, though, is there's only one number to plug in. It's not like we have to look and try and figure out, okay, what's the height, what's the radius, what's the diameter, put everything in the right spot. There's one number, it's just going in. The only thing we need to do is make sure we have the radius and not the diameter. And if we have diameter, then of course we're going to go cut it in half. So starting right here, only thing we need to plug in for is radius. Now, we're not going to be testing on this year, so you don't have to memorize this right now, but next year when you memorize it, you're going to want to write this as r squared because you're so used to pi r squared. But this again is the oddball one, so it's r to the third power. So volume equals 4/3 pi times our radius to the third, so 8.5. I'm going to put it in parentheses so I can raise it. You don't have to do that. And so we're going to kind of plug all this in the calculator at once to kind of run through it. But I want you to understand how to do 4/3, especially if you just had a regular calculator. You can still handle times 4/3. You don't need a scientific. So if we're running through this, first thing we're going to do is 8.5 raised to the third. So we got to hit the raise to button, which is right up here, the little arrow pointing up to the third. And let's go ahead and write that number down. We're not going to round that one. Can't find a good spot. So I'm going to leave the 4/3 alone just so we can deal with it in a second. Haven't done anything with pi. So 8.5 to the third becomes 614.125. Okay, at that point I'm going to leave this in my calculator. I'm going to hit times pi. And I'm not going to write this number down because we start to get really big decimals because we're using pi. And we could either round it now, which would affect our answer, so we don't want to do that, or write out that whole thing, and I'm not going to make you write out that whole thing. So basically at this point we need to take this number and multiply it by 4/3. So when we multiplied by 1/3, we just divided by 3. So this bottom number means divide by 3. We didn't do anything with the top because it was a 1 for 1/3, but really you're technically multiplying by 1, but you don't have to do anything when you multiply by 1. It doesn't change the number. But now since it's a 4, we actually have to do that. So we're going to multiply this by 4, and then the last thing, just like we did with the cones and the cylinders, is divide by 3. So this number represents 8.5 raised to the third times pi. Now we're going to times by 4/3. So times 4, divide by 3. So to multiply by a fraction, you're just multiplying by the top number and then dividing by the bottom. That's all you have to do. So now we'll round this because we got to our final answer. 2,572.4. And put our units. It's centimeters to the third power. Volume's always to the third because we've multiplied centimeters 3 times. That shows up right here. We did 8.5 raised to the third. 8.5 is centimeters. So it was 8.5 times 8.5 times 8.5. Centimeters times centimeters times centimeters is centimeters to the third power. All right, pretty straightforward. Just a little bit of calculator practice is all we need here. So let's run to the second one. Writing the formula down. 4/3 pi r to the third. We need to be careful on this one. They've given us the diameter all the way across. We need the radius, so we're going to take half. So the radius is 6. So when we plug this in, it's going to be 4/3 pi times 6 to the third. Bring the calculator back in. 6 raised to the third is 216. So 6 to the third is 216. We still have pi. We still have 4/3. Now some calculator practice. So I'm going to do 216 times pi. Get a nasty number. I'm not going to write it down. I'm not going to round it. Leave it in the calculator. We're going to times this number by 4/3. Now you can actually put it all in at once. You can hit times 4, divide by 3 without hitting equals. So it almost looks like times 4/3 in your calculator. This will work. The reason this is going to work, sometimes it doesn't work when you plug a bunch in your calculator. This works because it knows to multiply first and then divide. And that's the order we want it to do it in. So it's going to automatically work out the way we want. So volume equals 904.8 inches to the third. And that's it.